My name is Zach Dewhurst and I'm the owner of PrintPhase. In this video, we're going to go over the entire cutting process from start to finish using the Roland GS-24 desktop vinyl cutter. The first thing you need to do is install the Cutting Wizard software onto a computer. From there, you also need to install either Cut Studio or CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator and the necessary plugins to run the cutter. Now, in our case, we're going to actually use CorelDRAW, and we're going to set up the artwork to simply cut a very easy name. First, what you want to do is you want to set your canvas size on CorelDRAW. From here, you can easily type whatever you want, typically a name. Now, it is important that you set the width and height of the canvas to the necessary sheet or roll size of the material that you're cutting. In essence, you don't want to have the canvas be larger than your actual cuttable area. Most of the cuttable materials are either 15 or 20 inches in width, and you want to always give yourself at least an inch on each side when cutting. So if you're cutting 15 width inch material, the maximum cutting area is 13 inches, and 20-inch material, it's actually 18. Now, once you have everything typeset and where you want it, it's important that you then select the entire image and hit the mirror button. Because we're actually creating a transfer, we need to mirror the image so that when we press it, it looks correct on the garment. Once everything is set, you can come over to File, Print, and select the Roland GS-24. Now, what you want to do is you want to hit the Preferences tab and make the unit of measurement from millimeters to inches and set the cutting area to the exact same width and length as you did within CorelDRAW. Once you've done this, hit OK and then Apply, and essentially you should see your cuttable material within the box. If it expands outside of the box, you need to go back into the preferences and change the size of the cuttable area. Once everything is where you want it to be, you can then click OK and it will be sent to the cutter. Now, when it comes to cutting with the Roland GS-24 cutter, it can cut two different types of materials, essentially sheet media or roll media. From here, there are many different types of materials that can be cut from them, but it's important that you let the cutter know what type of material you're cutting. The reason being is, if it's a roll media, the cutter assumes that the roll is long and will not have any problems as far as length. But if it's sheet media, it needs to know not only the width, but also the length so that the cutter doesn't cut the design off of the media. Now, in our situation, we're actually going to cut a roll, and how we're going to do that is, essentially you take your roll and you load it on the back of the machine, and then you pull it through the small area in the cutter. And what you want to do is you have rolling guards, two of them on this machine. And the guards need to be within a shaded area on the machine. And this is essentially to make sure that the media is fed cleanly back and forth without moving left or right. It is extremely important that you give yourself at least half an inch to the outside of the rolling guard to make sure again that the vinyl material does not come off of the guard and is correctly fed back and forth without any issues. Once you have it where you want it, you want the material to be about an inch or two away from the actual guard itself. Once you have it there, pull the lever towards yourself to lock the rolling guards into place. Now essentially this media is locked onto the machine, so then it can then be set up for cutting. Now, whenever you're cutting rolled material, it's a good idea to give the roll some slack by simply just pulling up and just letting it go. Essentially, this will allow the machine to not have so much tension from pulling directly from the roll, but because you have some loose vinyl there, it's easier for it to cut. Now, when cutting, it is extremely important to make sure that all your variable settings are correct. It all starts out with your blade. You typically use a 45 or a 60-degree blade depending on the type of material that you're cutting. The higher degree blade, essentially a 60 degree, is used for materials like glitter and flock, while the 45 degree blade is used more for your fashion film, premium plus, and reflective. To test and make sure that all of your variables are correct outside of the blade, you want to make sure that your force and your offset are also correct. The force is the amount of pressure that is going to be applied from the blade, and the offset is actually going to set the distance of the blade holder from the material. It's also important to make sure that the blade is correctly loaded into the machine and is only exposed 2 millimeters. If any of these variables are incorrect, you will have problems as far as getting nice lines and curves cut. Also, the material can actually be cut so thick that it can actually destroy the carrier, which will also have many problems. So you want to make sure that all of these variables are correct. And how we do that is we actually run what is called a test cut. If you simply hit the test button at the top left corner, what will happen is the machine will actually test cut a circle and then a square within the circle and then a cross within the box. From there, we can weed away the circle and then the cross and then the box to make sure that each of them is cut cleanly and can easily be weeded away, and that the carrier isn't being cut, ruining the transfer. Now, the first thing we need to do actually though is to tell the machine if we're going to cut roll or sheet media. Again, the reason being is if it's a sheet, it needs to know the length of material so that we don't cut more than we can. So since we're at a roll, I'm going to essentially hit enter. If it were a sheet, I'd hit the arrow button over and then I would hit enter. What it's doing is it's measuring the width of the material, and from there it'll actually report it to you, but in case, since we're using a roll, it doesn't know the actual finished length. It just assumes that we're at least long enough to cut whatever design we have. Now, again, what we're going to do is we're going to run a test cut by hitting the top left button. And again, this is to make sure that all of our variable settings are correct. Once that is done, you'll hit the menu button twice and then enter to unset up, bringing the cutting blade back over. From here, you want to roll out your media, lock your lever, and use a weeding tool to weed away the cutting area. Now again, first thing it cut was a circle. We should be able to easily pull that away and then be able to pull away the cross and then be able to pull away the box within it. In this case, we can tell that our variable settings are all good and we're good to cut our design. I'm going to roll the media back just a little bit, lock it back in place, again making sure that the lever is within the shaded area and it's not too close to the edge of the material. Again, we're going to have to choose roll by hitting enter. And from here we can actually begin cutting by telling the computer program to send the artwork to the cutter. We're just going to hit OK. And essentially the media is being moved back and forth while the cutter is cutting the design out. Depending on the speed that you have set, it'll dictate the amount of time it takes to cut the actual design. Again, most of the time you're going to cut names and numbers for sports teams and so forth. It's a lot easier to cut and print a one-color design than any type of multicolor design. Once the design has been completely cut, what we will do is we're going to cut the material from the machine and then start to weed it. So we're going to hit menu twice, hit enter for unsetup, roll the media down. We can faintly see where the cut is, and we're going to use this cutting guard and just a carpenter's knife to cut the material nice and straight. Now that we have the vinyl off of the cutter, we can essentially start to weed it. What you want to do is you take your weeding tool and you'll begin to weed the material from the vinyl. Now, it's a good rule of thumb to weed any small detail within an area first instead of your larger area. And the reason you want to do this is it'll hold itself better on the carrier. Weighting can be a little tedious, and the different types of materials that you'll cut will have different types of carriers, some of which are easier than others. But by simply pulling away the excess material, you can begin to actually see the design being revealed. Now, once you have all of the material weighted, you have a finished product. Now, again, the carrier should be then placed like this on the shirt so it prints correctly on there. If you look at the cutting side, we mirrored it, so it looks backwards until you actually go to press it. As you can see, cutting has many different variables to get right, but with just a little bit of practice, it's an easy decoration process to master. If you have any questions on how to use the Roland GS-24 cutter and how to cut any type of material, please do not hesitate contacting us. Thank you.